When Peacemaker was first announced a few years back to be getting his own streaming show, many weren't sure what to make of it. Sure, people had fun with John Cena's hyper-violent patriot vigilante in Gunn's Unalive Squad, but could he actually carry a show? Yes, surprisingly. There's a reason 90% of Peacemaker Season 1 carried over to the DCU beyond being one of James's babies. The deep dive into this emotionally troubled crime fighter as he confronts his abusive and traumatic past, along with battling his way through an intense character arc, while staving off an alien invasion with a feast of a supporting cast, was one of the last highlights of the dead and buried DCEU. Season 1 ended with our man Chris overcoming his own dark mask and seeing the monster he was, and his wish to be better than it, but still showing he had a long road to redemption. As Season 2 would show, his journey to betterment may be longer than he's hoping, like he may need some hobbits for this journey kind of long. Season 2 picks up with Chris trying to become a more legitimate superhero, but thwarted both by his own bloody reputation following him wherever he goes, and a very unforgiving Rick Flag Sr. hounding him for any excuse to avenge his fallen son. Add in his relationship drama with Harcourt and you have a recipe for some destructive, impulsive choices. So when Chris finds a portal in his late dad's stolen pocket dimension that leads to a parallel Earth that seems to give him everything he's ever wanted, he comes to a new crossroads, toughing it out and building an imperfect but honest life in his current universe, or jumping ship and starting over in this new dimension that's grass seems a lot greener, but inevitably stained with its own blood. Well, this wouldn't be the first time our boy Chris has been an isekai protagonist. Hey team, Phantom Skull the Super Security VTuber here, and today we continue looking at the messy character arc of Christopher Smith through Season 2 of Peacemaker. Let's dive on in and see our anti-hero's long road to betterment and the unintended consequences of trying to run away from your problems. And oh boy, does Chris make more problems for himself and his friends than the ones he's running away from. So to begin, I highly recommend checking out my first video on Chris as it covers all the basics with him and his character arc through Season 1, to avoid repeating myself as this will already be a pretty long video. Secondly, to be clear, this isn't a full review of Peacemaker Season 2, and more of a character focus on our main man Chris, since character analysis videos are my main thing, and even Gunn himself has said this season was more of a character-focused drama in a superhero setting over a traditional superhero show. If I had any overall thoughts, I'd say it was a fantastic character study that might have dragged a little at the beginning. Honestly, episodes 4 and 5 could have been made into one episode, in my opinion. And I feel like some people are valid in feeling the finale was a bit of a letdown, who were expecting a similar vibe to Season 1. And Gunn didn't help with overhyping a character drama-heavy story, when the general audiences were expecting a more balance of superhero shenanigans and character drama like Season 1, and only getting an hour of the latter and setup for Man of Tomorrow, but that's a talk for a different video. But for me, it stuck the landing on its goal of being a deep dive into Chris's struggles to make a better life for himself with his friends, even if he can't get everything he wants. But let's dial it back to the start of this hot mess of an adventure. So we pick up with Chris and the rest of the 11th Street kids a while after defeating the Butterflies. Chris has a new lease on life with his prison sentence suspended and allowed to return to public life no strings attached, and gains ownership of his awful dead dad's house. While letting Eagly out to fly in the quantum unfolding chamber, he finds a door with Peacemaker helmets and the same code as Augie's, and finds another dimension where he's alive. Chris rightfully nopes the hell out of that door and represses it for 6 months, and focuses on his quest to be a more respectable superhero instead. One that immediately gets shot down during his tryouts for the Justice Gang, as we discover they consider him a homicidal joke not worth seriously interviewing.
I'm considered the finest marksman in the world. Not just with firearms, with any weapon, really.
He murders people. Write that down.
Where?
I am also proficient in hand-to-hand combat.
Volatile tendencies?
Guy, chill out, I got it handled.
I have a variety of helmets.
Put it under sociopathy there.
While their comments are catty and uncalled for, and a bit hypocritical since one of the interviewers was same-day shipping dictators to hell Hawkgirl. Maxwell Lord makes a good distinction when he asks about the deaths on Chris's record that weren't justified. As much as Chris wants to be a real superhero, he struggles with overcoming people's perceptions of him as the kill everyone for peace guy whose dad was a racist supervillain. Not helping things is newly appointed Argus director Rick Flag Sr., using his position to scope out any legal excuse to get his hands on the man who killed his son. It doesn't matter how tormented Chris is about this action, or his attempts to atone for it through being a better hero. Daddy Flag can't stand Chris being out and free and his son in the ground. And since the events of Superman 2025 putting an emphasis on cracking down on dangerous interdimensional tech, finding out about the Smith family pocket dimension gives him the in he needs to legally rock Peacemaker's shit. And the ultimate final straw in Chris's mess of a life is his deteriorating relationship with Harcourt. While he's still in love with her, Harcourt has her own messy train wreck of a life to sort. Beyond finding out she and Flag Jr. were friends with benefits, and her complex feelings after getting to know Chris, which complicated her original goals of revenge for her late buddy, we find out later the two shared a romantic night on a boat that poor Chris put too much emotional stock into compared to her. Allegedly. We'll get back to that. As all these struggles begin to pile up, Chris begins visiting the other dimension more, and finds it to seemingly be the best dimension ever. He finds out his brother Keith is alive in this dimension, their dad is loving and caring, and the three are a team of respected superheroes known as the Top Trio. Chris is at a loss with this dimension, and hanging out with these versions of his family he never knew in such a positive way. And when happenstance causes him to get into a fight with his hyper-aggressive Earth 2 counterpart, which ends with him accidentally killing him in self-defense, he sees a golden opportunity to squeeze himself into this perfect dimension and getting everything he ever wanted. Episodes 1 through 5 would be Chris struggling with this decision as he goes back and forth from Earth 2. At the same time, we see while he has good intentions, we do see he still suffers from some issues of ego and being too self-absorbed to appreciate the things he has. While he has true, endeared friends in the form of the 11th Street Kids, he specifically keeps treating Adrian poorly despite how much the troubled vigilante looks up to him. He keeps obsessing over his feelings for Harcourt without truly sitting down and talking to her about it mutually. Admittedly, Harcourt has half of the blame here since they're both messy train wrecks. And ultimately Chris, while he legitimately wants to be a better superhero, doesn't seemingly want to put in the work to fix his image, or accept that some people aren't ever going to let go of his bloody psycho patriot past. All of the 11th Street Kids suffer in some way from this journey to better their lives, but struggling with not wanting to deal with the fallouts of their decisions, or in Harcourt's case, walking off getting screwed over despite having done nothing to deserve it. In short, we're dealing with people who don't like how unfair their lives have turned out, and deciding what kind of people they're going to be moving forward, regardless of how tough the path is. Chris ultimately chooses the easy path, with a boatload of consequences that we'll soon find out. When Chris spends a day on Earth 2, he drinks in a life that he thinks was stolen from him. He gets to have a relationship with his brother Keith he never got to have here. He got to also enjoy a loving father who wasn't a racist piece of shit that we know of. We'll get back to that. And he has a lovely day with Earth 2 Harcourt. While she's vastly different from the Harcourt he fell for, this more traditionally feminine and seemingly mentally sound version hits it off well with our Chris. Though finding out how much of a scumbag Earth 2 Chris was, this wasn't that hard a task. And when Chris saves the DMV from the Sons of Liberty, he gets one of the major things he's wanted all season: validation. The cheers of the crowd to be treated like a real hero instead of a bloody joke. Granted, Chris is so high on his personal happiness, he misses out on a lot of red flags about Earth 2, but let's put a pin in that for now. So when he comes back to make his final decision, Being hunted by Orgus, getting the kicked out of him by Daddy Flag, and reminded of the good man he murdered, and seemingly betrayed by Harcourt after coldly telling him the night on the boat meant nothing to her, his choice was made. Even after a heart-to-heart with Adebayo, whom Chris considers his most cherished friend, he's unconvinced by her attempt to make him understand that, as good as that dimension seems to him, it's not his dimension, and he was put on this one for a reason, and he should make the most out of it. Ultimately, he chooses to leave with Eagly to start over in the best dimension ever. But when the 11th Street kids follow him to Earth 2 to get him back, they unfortunately figure out something horrific that Chris was too self-absorbed to pick up on when the other shoe drops, or should I say jackboot.
Fuck me.
This is your perfect world, huh?
That's right, this wasn't Earth 2, it was Earth X the entire time. Now, some people were a little skeptical about Chris not picking up on the fact he was cruising in a Nazi dimension until Harcourt spelled it out for him, but while I love our Peaceman, he is in fact that much of an idiot.
How was I supposed to notice that?
The giant f***ing mural of Hitler?
Fuck, how'd I miss that?
But seriously, this is in character for Chris. A central theme of this season, alongside accepting the grass isn't always as green on the other side, is that people have a bad habit of not seeing the dark corners of their surroundings because they're not wanting to look for them. Chris, beyond his free-spirited bisexuality and growing empathy for others, is basically the neo-Nazi wet dream physically, so he wouldn't immediately be targeted like others would, such as Adebayo. And alongside that, he's far too focused on his healthier family dynamic, relationship with other Harcourt, and being cheered as a superhero to go looking for anything negative about Earth X at first. Some people have a bad habit of overlooking tyranny and the suffering of others so long as their personal needs are met. This also gets brought up in Andor with the Galactic Empire. Plenty of core planet citizens were fine for a time under the Empire, so they could look the other way at the Empire shoving their jackboots up the asses of the Outer Rim and alien planets, since it wasn't their problem yet. Insert the first they came for quote here. Until tyranny affects them, they're either too ignorant or too callously indifferent to have empathy for those others that the regime oppresses. Chris is very much the former in that regard. He's not an intentionally selfish person, but he's so caught up in the perfect personal life he never got to have, he ignores the red flags around him. Though Episode 7 does stretch that benefit of the doubt, after realizing he never noticed a giant Hitler mural in Earth X Argus's offices, a place he's visited multiple times. But I digress. Harcourt clocking something wrong with this dimension in the first hour of being there is very in character. She's a cynical and suspicious person by nature, and had no distractions like Chris did. Alongside that, you have to remember Chris was raised by a violently abusive white supremacist. While on some level Chris rejected his twisted ideals, it was still his upbringing. Similar to how he didn't see the big deal about having a dead alien's pocket dimension in his family's closet. It's what he grew up with and saw as normal. So of all the people out there, Chris was the last to be properly equipped to pick up on Nazi dog whistles until he had a swastika and a Hitler mural smacking him in the face. And episodes 6 and 7 finally wipes off the glitz and glamour of Earth X we've seen so far. Despite the usual suspects making memes about how clean and orderly this dimension of all white people is, and intentionally missing the point, particularly the not subtle at all moment of Adebayo seeing those clean and orderly white people suddenly turn into psychotic, bloodthirsty revenants over a black woman walking down the street. Anyone with an ounce of media literacy and integrity will understand the full nightmare of Earth X. Things look good here, so long as you match the criteria of what the regime considers good. Suddenly the Sons of Liberty trying to blow up the DMV puts a lot into perspective. This is a nightmare dimension where evil has become the norm. and violent resistance is the only answer. Between finally having an honest heart-to-heart with DCU Harcourt about their absolutely relationship status, and getting a sobering reality check when his perfect dimension turns out to be a dystopian nightmare that's about to gobble up his real friends, Chris springs into Nazi-punching action and sets to get his friends out of Earth X, though his suffering was just beginning. After being rescued by Earth X Augie and coming clean to him and a very angry Keith about his counterpart's death, we learn a shocking revelation that, despite this being DCU Augie's white supremacist wet dream of an Earth, Earth X Augie is actually a good person and doesn't subscribe to its Nazi beliefs. However, his definition of good can be murky since he's a complacent participant in their evil society, which includes death camps for minorities, but let's save that for a future video on the dragon, shall we? Finding out his alternate dad was a legitimately good person, seconds after he's tragically killed by Vigilante misunderstanding the situation, along with the trauma of seeing his now blood-raged brother almost dying again during a brawl to escape Earth X, the Peacemaker. No, Christopher Smith finally breaks.
Get off him! Get off him, please!
Nobody can ever call John Cena just a wrestler turned actor after that performance. Good lord. Chris comes to a terrifying revelation about himself. It doesn't matter what dimension he goes to. Everything wrong with his life, even ignoring his evil father's hand in it, is because of himself. The cycle of violence continues to follow him no matter what he does to try and be a better hero. Death and suffering follow him wherever he goes. Our broken hero finally stops running, believing he never deserved to get a second chance, or to be a hero. He surrenders the quantum unfolding chamber to Flag and Orgus, and accepts himself back into prison, believing that this is the only place a guy like him belongs. Chris honestly believes he's a violent man who can never change, and corrupts everyone he comes into contact with his own violence. So to keep what's left of the people he loves alive, he needs to be locked up and alone forever. Looking back on previous episodes, Chris coming to this conclusion makes sense. At the start, he solely blames his terrible upbringing for his past actions, something the Justice Gang interviewers mock and belittle, considering it a poor excuse. While his monstrous dad did have a hand in it, Chris still had a load of issues that were still on him. After finding out his Earth X counterpart practically had all of his same problems even with a loving family, the messed up Nazi society influence aside, he does come to agree how he turned out partially had to do with himself and not just his terrible childhood. But after the death of Blue Dragon and the near death of his Earth X brother, Chris goes overboard in the opposite direction, thinking he's an irredeemably disturbed individual who kills and destroys everyone he comes into contact with. Now, for the finale, we're going to solely focus on Chris, which means we'll be skipping over a lot of things. Since, to be brutally honest, 80% of this hour-long finale was setting up Man of Tomorrow, and Flag suddenly turning into Waller 2.0 and using the QUC to make an interdimensional meta prison, almost none of which has anything to do with Chris until the final moments. But again, another day, another video on that. During the finale, he refuses to see anyone, and dodges his friends when they use Vigilante's stash of stolen drug money to bail him out of jail. But when they finally confront him, they hold a much-needed intervention with their friend. He thinks he's a cursed being who will kill or taint anyone he befriends. Once again adds, with her actress giving a performance that deserves all of the accolades, by the way, gets through to Chris that he's more than just his bad choices. While he needs to own up to them, his worst choices were at the directions of others like his father or Waller. But when he makes his own choices, he's much better than he thinks he is. He's no longer the gleefully murderous psycho-patriot he was when we first saw him. Sure, he still kills people, but he's far more principled and uses his violence against people he thinks deserves it, over just wantonly killing for peace. We have to remember that Chris, at the end of the day, is still an anti-hero. He's not gonna suddenly become Superman, which is okay. and he touched almost all of the 11th Street kids. He helped Ads figure out who she wants to be, to embrace her super agent dreams. He helped Harcourt move on from being an apathetic cog in a corrupt system and to take a stand for something. Hell, he encouraged Economos, the most famously cowardly person in their group, to stand up for himself and take risk after risk to do what's right all season. And Adrian was there too. Much like most of Season 2, he's kinda sidelined in this friend group, and he's still a mentally unhinged sociopath, but hey, he's there for Chris too, damn it. Chris finally recognizes he had all of the love and validation he needed from his real friends. And even if he can't be the hero he wanted to be, much like Earth X Augie, he can do what he can to be a decent person on an indecent Earth. And the final key was confronting Harcourt about the night on the boat, which the finale reveals was them both becoming vulnerable and sharing a passionate kiss. Something that terrified Harcourt over her mixed up feelings about the late Rick Flag Jr. and her own problems. Chris asks her point blank, not expecting anything romantic to come of it, simply wanting to know if she felt anything on that night. To know he was capable of giving someone a positive feeling and not misery and suffering like he thought of himself. Harcourt admits it did, and he was an idiot for not realizing it. And finally, the Peacemaker found peace. While they seemingly don't plan to confront Flag and the government's plan to make a very illegal meta present in another dimension for now, the gang, using Adrian's confiscated crime money, start their own private security company, Checkmate, to try and do good on their own terms, instead of being complacent agents of morally bankrupt governments or people. They're also joined by half of the Argus cast, disgusted with Flag Sr.'s actions, seemingly putting Checkmate on the track to be a good-aligned rival to the now Luthor Corp compromised Argus. Chris finally found solace in his life, with a finally healthy relationship with an equally healing Harcourt, and finding a new way to be a hero with his friends. Granted, they do gloss over the fact Chris still had a pending trial for his illegal dimension tech, but I'm assuming they hired a really good lawyer with that vigilante cash. Regardless, Christopher Smith moved on from his bloody past and into a brighter future of his own making. Until now, full heel Papa Flag swoops in and dumps him in the Salvation Dimension as its first prisoner, finally getting his revenge for his son, and leaving our boy stranded on another Earth with unknown creatures slowly approaching. Yeah, I can see why fans are divided on this finale. The very messy discussion about the overall finale and plot beats that I'm saving for a future video aside, Season 2 at least won in its goal of having Chris's character arc come full circle. The journey of Peacemaker from the violent super patriot he was in Unalive Squad to the emotionally broken but healing anti-hero fans have come to love is a testament to Gunn's character writing. While I feel once again he stumbles with the execution of certain plot beats, his attempt to tell Chris's story of redemption and putting in the work to better himself, and above all learn to love himself as well, is what's going to make or break Season 2 with viewers. Not stupid shit like the lack of action or number of cameos. Though I will admit, it could have used some more Nazi punching. While Season 3 is seemingly not happening, Gunn has teased this is not the last we've seen of Chris or the gang, implying a Checkmate show is in the works, and that no matter what, our favorite unhinged antihero is still a pivotal character in the DCU's future. So while Peacemaker's story is done for now, I'll be here waiting to see where our boy heads next. Though as fanboyish as it is, I hope in the future he wears his Peacemaker gear more often. Like for real, Cena wore more promotional stuff than he did all season for God's sakes. Remember your roots, damn it. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for checking out my video. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a like and a comment. How did you feel about Chris's journey through Season 2? Wish the season had done things differently? Let me know below. I'd love to discuss it. Be sure to subscribe for more super security fun. I also stream games over on the Purple site, so go give me a look over there if you feel inclined. Got more Peacemaker videos in the works with the season wrapped up, so I hope to see you all next time. Catch you later.